The human man was forced to marry the alien princess woman he complimented. The diplomatic gala was supposed to be simple. Show up, smile politely, avoid saying anything offensive, and leave without sparking a galactic incident. Commander Raylan had managed to do exactly that for 3 consecutive hours, which he considered a personal record, until someone handed him a goblet of Aelira star wine. The drink glittered as if it had been poured from the edge of a nebula, and after 2 sips his tongue felt looser than the gravity plating on an old freighter. He told himself to keep his mouth shut. That was the plan. Keep quiet, nod when appropriate, maybe feign interest in the long lectures about stellar trade routes, and above all, avoid eye contact with royalty. Unfortunately, royalty had a way of making itself unavoidable. Princess Aelira swept through the crowd with the kind of presence that made people step back without realizing they were stepping back. Her gown shimmered as though it were stitched from folded starlight, and her long, elegant ears caught every whisper in the hall. Raylan tried not to stare. He failed. Aelira looked like the kind of woman who had been sculpted by the universe specifically to intimidate men like him, the sort of woman you never addressed unless you wanted to lose your career. He reminded himself of that fact repeatedly, and then promptly forgot it when she stopped right in front of him. "Human Commander," she said, her voice smooth but sharp enough to cut steel. "You've been silent all evening." Raylan opened his mouth to offer something safe, perhaps a compliment about the food, or the impressive architecture of the hall. What emerged instead was, "Your eyes outshine the stars." The words slipped free before he could catch them. He blamed the star wine. He blamed the suffocating silence. Mostly, he blamed himself. He waited for laughter, for scorn, for someone to pat him on the shoulder and escort him out before he could do further damage. What he got was silence, the heavy, pin-drop kind. Every Aelira in the hall turned their luminous gazes toward him. Whispers broke out like sparks racing through dry grass. Aelira's expression shifted, just slightly, but enough to make Raylan's stomach drop through the floor. "Commander Raylan," she said, her tone suddenly formal. "Do you understand the weight of what you've spoken?" He blinked. "The weight? I was just—" "You have declared," she continued, voice rising so all could hear, "a vow of binding union." Raylan's brain went blank. The star wine fizzed in his veins. He thought he'd misheard, until the Aelira counselors began murmuring excitedly, some nodding, others scandalized. The words binding and union echoed again and again. "Wait," Raylan said, holding up both hands. That's not what I meant. I was just being polite. Humans compliment. It's a thing we do. Like, nice shoes. Or good soup." The room did not look convinced. Aelira studied him with a gaze that stripped every defense bare. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she inclined her head ever so slightly. "I accept." Raylan nearly dropped his goblet. "You what?" The chamber erupted. Alien voices clashed, overlapping in a storm of opinions. Some were congratulatory, others outraged. Aelira's attendants bowed, some hiding smirks behind delicate hands. Raylan tried to retreat, but found himself blocked by a pair of armored guards who seemed determined to ensure he didn't run. "Hold on," he said, pointing between himself and the princess. "This isn't what it looks like." "It looks," one guard said in a deep mechanical tone, "like the princess has a husband." The word hit him like a plasma blast to the chest. Husband. Married. By accident. To a woman he'd spoken exactly 7 words to. He wanted to protest further, but Aelira's gaze silenced him. Not hostile, not angry, merely unreadable. She gave the smallest of nods, and the chaos in the hall gradually subsided. "Commander," she said, "you are bound by your words. Aelira law does not permit retreat." Raylan's mind whirled. He thought of Earth's diplomatic treaties, of all the carefully worded clauses and escape routes, and wondered why no one had ever thought to add, "Do not, under any circumstances, compliment a princess." As the ceremony shifted around him, attendants preparing rituals faster than he could process, he muttered under his breath, "Next time, I'm sticking with nice shoes." Someone must have overheard, because he caught one Aelira diplomat trying not to laugh. The sound was reassuring in the same way as hearing a reactor about to blow, but knowing at least someone else found it funny. Raylan felt the world tilt, not from the wine this time, but from the realization that he wasn't walking out of this gala of the same man who'd walked in. He was walking out married, and judging by the faintest curve of a smile tugging at Aelira's lips, she knew exactly how much that terrified him. Raylan had woken up in some strange quarters before, cramped bunks on mining freighters, damp caves during planetary campaigns, once even inside a malfunctioning cargo pod with a family of smugglers' pet reptiles, but nothing compared to this. He opened his eyes to find himself surrounded by floating petals that glowed faintly blue, orbiting his bed like tiny moons. The air smelled faintly of ozone and citrus. A soft hum vibrated beneath the floor, and when he tried to swat the petals away, they dodged him. "Oh, good," he muttered. "Sentient flowers. Exactly what I needed." He sat up, squinting around. The room looked like a royal designer had lost a bet with a team of engineers. Crystal panels lined the walls, shifting colors with his movements. A circular table held trays of food that pulsed faintly as if alive. One item waved a tendril at him. He waved back out of politeness. Before he could make a run for the door, it slid open with a hiss. A pair of Aelari attendants swept in, carrying garments that shimmered like liquid light. Behind them, the princess herself appeared. Aelira looked untouched by sleep, her posture impossibly straight, her long ears catching the faint hum of the walls as though listening to a private song. "You are awake," she said simply. Raylan rubbed his temples. "Barely, and surrounded by what I assume is our new home." "These are your marital quarters," she replied, walking past him without pause. They were prepared in accordance with the Aelari tradition. He pointed at the hovering petals. "Do the petals stay here forever?" "Yes." "Do they multiply?" "They do in celebration." Raylan sighed. "So eventually we'll drown in flowers." "Perfect. Romantic and deadly." One attendant offered him a shimmering garment, which looked like a cross between a ceremonial robe and a disco ball. Raylan held it up, frowned, and shook his head. "I'm not wearing this. It looks like a star exploded and got stuck in fabric form." "It is traditional," the attendant insisted. Raylan draped it over his arm and muttered, "So is indigestion. Doesn't mean I want it." Aelira's lips twitched, the smallest motion, but enough to betray amusement. Raylan caught it and raised an eyebrow. "Wait, did you just almost laugh?" "I did not," she replied too quickly. "Oh, you did. I saw the twitch." He pointed dramatically. Royal composure cracked. History made. Her ears tilted slightly, which he was starting to recognize as the Aelari equivalent of rolling eyes. "You are insufferable. Glad we're starting this marriage on a foundation of honesty," he shot back. The attendants retreated, leaving the two of them alone. Aelira approached the table and gestured at the pulsing dishes. "You must eat. Energy will be required for the ceremonies." Raylan prodded one of the dishes with a fork. It wiggled violently, then settled back into place. "This one's still alive. Should I wait until it dies of natural causes?" "It is more flavorful when resisting." He put the fork down immediately. "Right. I'll just stick to coffee. Do you have coffee?" Her silence told him everything. The rest of the morning blurred into a series of rituals. He was forced into the glittering robe, paraded before counselors, and introduced as Consort Raylan of Earth. The title made him cringe every time. When one counselor asked about his skills, Raylan proudly declared, "I make excellent toast." The translator didn't know the word for toast, so it came out as, "I am skilled at firebread." The counselor nodded gravely, clearly impressed. By midday he was exhausted. As soon as he found a quiet alcove overlooking the stars, he collapsed onto a bench. Aelira found him there minutes later. "You are not adjusting," she observed. "I'm adjusting fine," he said. "I only embarrassed myself 6 times before lunch. That's progress." She tilted her head. "Why do you make light of everything?" "Because if I don't, I'll remember that I'm technically married to a woman I barely know and living on a ship where the walls hum lullabies. Humor's cheaper than therapy." She considered this, then, to his surprise, sat beside him. Aelari marriages are not meant to be humorous. Neither are human ones, but we laugh anyway, he said, mostly at each other's cooking. Her ears twitched again, betraying another suppressed smile. He leaned closer. You should try it sometime. Laughing, I mean. Not cooking. Unless you enjoy poisoning people. She gave him a long look, one that carried the weight of someone who had been taught never to drop the mask of perfection. Finally, she said softly, perhaps later. Raylan grinned. I'll hold you to that. A laugh. Consider it my dowry. For the first time since the accident at the gala, he felt the tension ease. Maybe, just maybe, this marriage wouldn't kill him, unless the petals multiplied too quickly. Then all bets were off. Raylan decided that marriage to Princess Aelira was less about romance and more about surviving an endless gauntlet of ceremonial obligations designed by people who had never once considered that sitting in the same chair for 6 hours might kill a human spine. The day began with him standing stiffly beside her throne while dignitaries droned on about mineral rights in the Gamma Belt. By the third speech, his brain had given up and begun counting how many times the counselors adjusted their ceremonial sashes. By the 15th adjustment, he was praying for an asteroid strike. When the session finally recessed, Aelira rose gracefully, not a hair or twitch out of place, while Raylan stretched like a soldier crawling out of a cryopod. Does every meeting take that long? He asked, his voice cracking. That was a brief one, she replied. He groaned. If that was brief, I don't want to see what you call long. Do they hand out survival rations halfway through? They hand out focus stimulants. Perfect. Intergalactic politics, brought to you by space caffeine. I knew it. Later, when the counselors left, Raylan found himself in the Royal Archive room, a massive chamber filled with hovering data orbs. The Aelari archivist proudly explained that each orb contained centuries of law, marriage codes, and royal decrees. Raylan, still searching for a loophole in his accidental vows, immediately dove into the glowing spheres. 2 hours later, he emerged from the pile of orbs looking like a man who had stared too long into the abyss. Well, he said, I can confirm there's no divorce section, but I did find 3 separate clauses about what to do if your spouse is replaced by a shape-shifting assassin. That's oddly specific. Because it has happened 3 times, Aelira said. Raylan blinked. And you're all just fine with that? We have procedures. Good to know. I'll add it to my growing list of reasons I sleep with one eye open. Despite his sarcasm, he began noticing changes. Aelira no longer looked through him as though he were transparent. She began speaking more directly, less formally. At one point during dinner, he caught her staring at the stars through the viewport. When he asked what she saw, expecting some lofty answer about destiny, she simply said, I look for storms. I like when the plasma dances across the void. It feels alive. He chuckled. You prefer thunderstorms in space. That's almost human of you. She tilted her head. Almost. Well, humans usually get wet when they do it. Her lips twitched again, but this time she didn't suppress it. A small laugh escaped her, light and fleeting but real. The sound startled Raylan more than any counselor or assassin clause. Wait, did I just win? He asked. Win what? The game. Getting the princess to laugh. I'm putting that in my service record. You are absurd, and yet irresistible. Her silence was answer enough. The next morning, he was summoned by a group of human officers stationed aboard the Aelari vessel. They were not amused. The ranking ambassador, a stiff man who looked allergic to joy, greeted him with folded arms. Commander, we are deeply concerned about your entanglement. Entanglement? You make it sound like I tripped over a space vine. This so-called marriage jeopardizes Earth's bargaining position. We need you to find a way out. Raylan folded his arms to match. You think I haven't tried? Unless one of you knows how to unpropose an Aelari law, I'm stuck. One officer leaned forward. There's a loophole. If you publicly insult the princess, she may reject the bond. Raylan blinked. Insult her? Do you know what happens to people who insult royalty around here? Their names get filed next to those shape-shifting assassins. It is a risk you must take for Earth, the ambassador said gravely. Later that evening, he sat across from Aelira at dinner, the human suggestion weighing on him. He considered every possible insult. Her ears? Too obvious. Her gown? Too dangerous. Her food? It might bite back. Finally, he cleared his throat. So your ears. Ever considered trimming them down for better aerodynamics? The room went deathly quiet. Then Aelira burst into laughter. Not a small, restrained chuckle, an unguarded laugh that startled the attendants and left Raylan staring. When she finally regained composure, she shook her head. You are a fool. No one has ever dared say such things to me. Raylan leaned back, smirking. Glad to be the first. I'll take my medal now. Instead of banishing him, she kept smiling. The humans were doomed, the loophole closed forever, but Raylan couldn't bring himself to care. Something in that laugh felt far more important than treaties or titles. For the first time since the accidental vow, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, fate had better plans for him than escape. Raylan learned very quickly that married life with an alien princess wasn't just about awkward dinners and ceremonial speeches. It was also about assassination attempts. The first one happened during breakfast. He had just poked a spoon into something that looked like green pudding when the entire dish hissed, collapsed, and released a cloud of smoke. Aelira moved faster than his eyes could follow, sweeping the bowl into a containment field that shimmered like glass. She didn't even blink. Poisoned, she said calmly. Raylan coughed through the smoke. Good to know I was about to be murdered by pudding. Tell me again why we can't just eat toast. The second attempt came 2 days later. The floor of the royal corridor suddenly tilted, gravity reversing in a sharp snap. Raylan found himself plastered to the ceiling, arms flailing. Aelira floated beside him with the composure of someone who'd been trained since birth to ignore physics. Sabotage, she observed. Raylan groaned. Sabotage. No, sabotage is a bomb under the table. This is creative sadism. By the third attempt, when a ceremonial guard tried to sneak a blade disguised as a walking staff into a council session, Raylan had stopped being surprised. He confiscated the weapon and handed it over with a deadpan expression. You might want to rethink your disguise. Maybe try guard with staff that isn't humming suspiciously. The conspiracies weren't subtle anymore. Word spread across the ship that factions within the council were calling Aelira unfit, compromised by her human husband. Some whispered she had gone soft. Others claimed she was distracted by his ridiculous jokes. For Raylan, the stress should have been crushing. Instead, it turned strangely routine. Every morning he woke, checked the ceiling for falling daggers, shoved the petals out of his coffee, and braced for whatever imaginative new method the assassins would dream up. Aelira, to his surprise, began treating his commentary as a kind of shield. She allowed herself small laughs, sometimes even in public, and the attendants whispered in disbelief at the sound. One evening, after narrowly avoiding a plasma dart hidden inside a bouquet, they were forced to flee the ship entirely. Aelira's personal guard arranged transport to a crystalline moon hidden in the shadow of a gas giant. Their shuttle streaked across the void, pursued briefly by council interceptors before diving into the jagged caverns of the moon. Raylan stumbled out of the shuttle and nearly tripped over a glowing stalagmite. So this is our honeymoon spot? Lovely. I always dreamed of getting married and then hiding in a space cave while everyone tried to kill me. Aelira led him deeper inside, her voice steady. Here, the council cannot track us. We will have time to regroup. Great, Raylan muttered. Time to regroup. Maybe start a rock garden. Possibly invent cave toast. That night, they sat together by the fire of a portable fusion lantern. For once, there were no attendants, no counselors, no rituals. Just the hum of the lantern and the eerie echo of wind curling through crystalline tunnels. Raylan finally broke the silence. Why did you accept my vow? You could have laughed it off. Told everyone I was drunk. Saved us both a lot of trouble. Aelira hesitated, her long ears twitching slightly in the dim light. Because you spoke without calculation. No one has ever done that with me. Every word I hear is polished, strategic. But you. She looked at him, almost smiling. You stumbled. You blundered. And yet it was genuine. I wanted to know what it felt like to hear truth, even if by accident. Raylan stared at her, caught off guard. So you married me because I'm terrible at diplomacy? Yes, he laughed, shaking his head. That's the worst reason I've ever heard, and probably the most honest. For a moment, the cavern filled with the sound of her laugh, joining his, soft but certain. The following days were strangely domestic. They rationed supplies, bickered over how to arrange the sleeping mats, and argued about whether his singing during maintenance checks qualified as music or torture. Each joke eased the weight between them. Raylan discovered that Aelira could be sarcastic when she let herself, and she discovered that Raylan could be serious when the danger pressed too close. One night, as they walked along the crystalline ridges outside the cave, Raylan looked up at the gas giant looming above. You know, he said, if anyone asked me a month ago what married life would be like, I wouldn't have guessed constant assassination attempts and moon camping. And yet you endure, Aelira said. He grinned. Endure? I'm thriving. You should see my survival skills. I once made soup out of nutrient paste and shoe leather. Award-winning stuff. She tilted her head, ears catching the faint hum of distant storms. You are strange. And you, he said, bumping her shoulder lightly, are stuck with me. For the first time, she didn't correct him. She just smiled, faint but real, beneath the shadow of the giant planet, as though maybe, just maybe, being stuck with him wasn't the worst fate in the galaxy. The return to the council chamber was nothing like the first time. Then, Raylan had stumbled and drunk on star wine and sarcasm. Now he walked in sober, straight-backed, with Aelira at his side. The chamber buzzed with voices sharp as laser fire, counselors arguing over his existence, over her judgment, over the fate of a marriage no one had expected and fewer still wanted. The High Counselor slammed a staff against the floor. This union has destabilized the throne. The princess has grown weak under human influence. The bond must be dissolved. Raylan leaned toward Aelira and muttered, On Earth, people just ask for a divorce lawyer. You folks like the dramatic approach. Several counselors glared. Aelira's lips twitched in a restrained smile before she spoke aloud. Weak? You call surviving assassination attempts weakness? You call laughing in the face of conspiracies weakness? You call refusing to bow to fear weakness? Raylan added, Also, not to brag, but I've survived 3 different attempts to kill me with food. That deserves at least a medal. Or a free breakfast. The chamber rippled with murmurs. Some amused, some outraged. Aelira stepped forward, her presence commanding even in the uproar. This bond is not weakness. It is proof that we can see beyond calculation, beyond strategy, beyond centuries of suspicion. For the first time, I have someone at my side who speaks without guile. That honesty is strength. Raylan straightened, deciding if he was already halfway to galactic scandal, he might as well go all in. Look, I didn't plan this. Believe me, I didn't. But maybe that's why it matters. Because it wasn't a treaty, or a trade deal, or a bribe. It was just words. Clumsy, stupid words. And somehow those words built something none of you planned for. Maybe that's worth keeping. For a long moment, silence filled the hall. Then one counselor, the same who had once smirked at Raylan's jokes, chuckled. Perhaps honesty is overdue. The tide shifted. Whispers turned to nods. Accusations faded into reluctant acceptance. The conspirators who had tried to sabotage the marriage were dragged into the open, their plots revealed by evidence Aelira had gathered during their exile on the crystalline moon. One by one, the dissenting voices lost their footing. At last, the High Counselor raised his staff again. So be it. The Union shall stand. May it be the bridge we did not expect, but now require. The proclamation echoed like thunder. Raylan exhaled slowly. Well, he muttered, that's one way to crash a political system. Accidentally marry a princess. Highly effective, would not recommend. Later, back aboard their quarters, the petals still floated lazily, multiplying with every passing day. Raylan swatted one away from his coffee. You know, he said, these things are getting out of hand. At this rate, we'll suffocate under romantic decor. Aelira arched a brow. Perhaps that is a fitting end for us. Speak for yourself. I prefer to go out heroically. Maybe saving a planet. Or at least choking on something impressive, not petals. She laughed, a sound that no longer startled the attendants who lingered nearby. By now, they were used to it. Raylan leaned back, watching her. You've changed, you know. Her ears twitched. So have you. Yeah. I used to think the galaxy was just duty and missions. Now he shrugged. Now it's this. You. Us. Not what I expected. Not what I wanted. But exactly what I needed. For a moment, there was no throne, no council, no looming threats. Just the two of them, human and Aelira, awkwardly bound by accident but choosing, finally, to stay bound by choice. She reached for his hand, her voice soft. Your words began this. Do you regret them still? He grinned, squeezing her fingers. Not a chance. Though if I ever compliment someone again, I'm starting with their shoes. Her laughter filled the chamber, rich and bright, echoing off the humming walls. Beyond the viewport, the stars stretched endless and sharp, no longer distant pinpricks of duty, but the road ahead. One they would travel together, clumsy vows and all. The end.